shall we have a lightning round of UK stories, wrapping up with one of our title headline stories for the day. Reform UK's Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK, blasts Robert Peston in ITV clash. It's not trivial. The Reform UK leader and the ITV political editor clashed during tonight's episode of Peston. Now, Peston, as I understand, is a well-known political commentator in the UK, as they say, for ITV, which is one of our big news stations. Major political commentator for ITV, one of the major stations. Talking to Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK. Now, I've been saying for a while that I need to do more research on Reform UK. I like the cut of their jibs so far, but there's more details clearly I need to learn, and this is an example where Richard Tice is in an interview, so I figured it'd be good to watch it. Richard Tice clashed with Robert Peston over Lee Anderson's refusal to apologise for controversial comments about Sadiq Khan. ITV's political editor grilled the Reform UK's leader on the Ashfield MP not saying sorry for claiming Islamists had got control of the London mayor. I wouldn't be sorry either, and that appears to be true. Then again, you don't have to expect the Islamists have control of him. I think he does these things because he wants to. The heated moment came as the show discussed the racism row surrounding Tory donor Frank Hester over alleged comments made about Diane Abbott. You should make more offensive comments about Diane Abbott. She is awful. Mr. Tice said, if someone does or says something inappropriate, appalling, shocking, you deal with it promptly. We've all had it, and that's what you've got to do. I don't know what he means by that. Hopefully he is not saying that mean words should result in punishment. But Labour MP Harriet Harman said, I think the problem with you saying that, Richard, is your MP has been really whipping up toxicity against Sadiq Khan. Talking about Sadiq Khan having given London over to the Islamists, which is utterly... The Reform UK leader hit back. Let's be very clear, what Lee was saying was that many millions of people are appalled at the streets of London by his own admission, slightly clumsily with language. He was saying, we don't want our streets taken over by extreme Islamists week in, week out. Sounds like he is unfortunately playing the political correctness game a bit, which I'm not a fan of. Mr. Peston said, he said the mayor was controlled by Islamists. I've noted that you've been many times asked to repeat those words. You won't, because obviously you don't agree with them. Secondly, you said his remarks were clumsy, but he's never apologised for them. Mr. Tice replied, his remarks were clumsy, but he hasn't apologised for the sentiment of what he was saying, which is absolutely right, Robert, and that his millions of British people are furious that our streets are being taken over and dominated by fear, and the Jewish community are terrified now to come out on the streets. Again, the Jewish thing, but that's part of the course with this movement. Again, he's not wrong. He's not wrong about any of it. Mr. Peston said, this is not a trivial point because even Mr. Hester has apologised to Diane Abbott for being rude. He may not have apologised for being racist, but he's apologised for being rude. Actually, Lee Anderson hasn't even apologised. Mr. Tice insisted he had not apologised because the sentiment of what he's saying is absolutely right. He added, we don't want our streets taken over by those extremists week in, week out. That's it, the end of the article. Okay, interesting. At least Tice is saying the right thing, but I wish he wouldn't be quite so beholden to political correctness. Right, lightning round, next article. Out of touch, Lords warned they must respect democratic will after delaying Rwanda plan. The delays have prompted fury from Tory MPs who have warned Lords they must respect the democratic will of the House of Commons. So, Rwanda plan is an idea, an attempt to start deporting people from the UK, which is a very small like pinprick of light in what is otherwise a colossal void of nothing being done about the issue. Still, if this were to get going, it might open that breach further. It might start to be a very good thing, but it's moving so slowly, so interminably slowly, that arguably it is worse as a distraction or as a containment than its actual positive effects. It seems like it's never going to actually happen. I don't think they've deported a single person with it yet. Rwanda's fine with it. Rwanda's agreed. But we just our own politicians can't agree to just let it happen. And now the Lords have attempted to amend the plan. Even though the people want, the British people have for a long time been very concerned about immigration. I expect the majority would want this Rwanda plan to go ahead. The Commons even wanted to go ahead, the politicians, by majority, because the majority are Conservative. But the Lords are butting in. Rishi Sunak's plan to deport Channel migrants to Rwanda has been dealt a fresh blow by unelected peers, further delaying the first flight to Kigali. Referring to them as unelected peers sort of seems like poisoning the well. I know some in chat will argue they shouldn't have power if they're not elected, and I understand. But our system does have some power delegated to those who are not elected, and I don't think that's inherently bad. I think you can have multiple sources of power. It doesn't all have to come directly from the people. Though in our country, most of it does. The House of Lords voted again on Wednesday to water down plans to prevent more migrant deaths in the English Channel. Now, that's not the goal. Preventing migrant deaths in the English Channel is not the goal of deportation. It's a minor beneficial side effect, but honestly, the lives of those migrants is by far not our priority. And if they're going to try and cross the channel, when it is as dangerous as it should be, if they die doing it, it's kind of their own stupid fault. However, that problem is solved if we just deport people, or just stop feeding them for free, because then they won't come over anymore. So I kind of get what they're saying, but presenting that as if it's the priority is not sensible. This is despite warnings that further amendments to the Rwanda bill would perpetuate the endless cycle of legal challenges. And Tory MPs have tonight slammed the unelected Lords, warning they must respect the democratic will of the House of Commons. The defeats mean there is little to no chance of the safety of Rwanda bill clearing Parliament before MPs leave Westminster for the Easter break next Tuesday. And flights are now unlikely to take off before June, as officials believe it will take at least 6 weeks to get planes off the ground once the legislation gains royal assent. Bear in mind, there are like serious criminal migrants who could be put on those planes and flown back to Rwanda within the day. But because of bureaucratic fury, they reckon 6 weeks after they managed to pass it through the Commons, the Lords, and get royal assent. It's just ridiculous. This is, if nothing else is bureaucratic bloat, or if there's no other, or how I put it this exactly, this stinks of bureaucratic bloat. And I strongly suspect that's the reason this is happening. Tory MP Tom Hunt told the Daily Express, the House of Lords needs to respect the democratic will of the Commons. They're totally out of touch on the issue of illegal immigration. Hardly any of them have had to live with the consequences of rampant mass immigration and the small boats crossings. I would single out the Archbishop of Canterbury in particular, who is doing great damage to the Church of England through his foolish interventions on the issue. Senior backbench MP David Jones added, the Lords needs to understand that the Commons is directly answerable to the electorate. The Commons have spoken very clearly. Now that the amendments have been rejected, the Lords should accept that and allow the legislation to proceed. Now, this is kind of a bad argument because the Lords are not supposed to be as beholden to the people as the Commons are. And that's sometimes good, I think, but in this case, not. Sometimes the Commons end up being terrible, so it's good to have a different influence to check and balance that. But in this case, the Commons are correct and the Lords are not. For those wondering, Rwanda plan, not really going anywhere. But deporting people to Africa is murder. We could have picked a worse country than Rwanda. Rwanda's at least civilized enough to accept the deal. By the way, we're paying Rwanda to do this. In principle, we haven't done it yet. I assume we haven't paid them yet. But in principle, we're paying Rwanda to take these illegal migrants. It's such a scratching the surface plan. But doing it would be better than nothing. We can't even get that far. If you increase the death in the channel, they stop attempting it. That is exactly what I mean, yeah. It should be dangerous for people to just invade the country like that. It should be dangerous because we make it dangerous. I'm not talking about just blowing up the boats. But if they don't stop, I think something up to that point may be justified. But you won't need to do it. You won't need to go that far. If you just start, like, shoot the boat so that it sinks once, and that will halve the crossings if they hear about it. As long as they know that's the policy. And by the way, you don't necessarily let them drown. You can rescue them and drop them back off in France. Let the French deal with it. If the French are upset, too bad. You let them over in the first place. Do something about it. That's the solution. You only need to do that once or twice, and they'll stop coming over. As long as the migrants know that 100% of boats will be sunk and the people in them return to France, if they are lucky enough not to drown, then problem solved. Mofaku, in terms of, I assume you're asking why not just bomb the boats? again, it's not necessary. And it's like, if something is not necessary, then even relatively small downsides like a diplomatic rejection matter. If nations we want to trade with sanction us because of the barbaric display of like brutality of blowing up these boats, even though they are invaders, that's still a very bad thing, and we don't need to go that far. That's what I'm saying. As long as the migrants know that they cannot get to the UK, or even if they know that once they're here they don't get free shit, then it's fine. Then they'll stop coming over. Like 99% of them will stop. As long as they know they can't actually make it, 99% of them will stop, at least. That's all you need to do. But for whatever reason, successive governments who have promised to do something about this cannot even do that. Ebun says, hear me out, floating barbed wire. There are plenty of legitimate crossings. Trading boats, tourists, whatever else. So you can't stop all of them. Coast Guard as well. You can't stop all of them. But I'm pretty sure that with a single day's NHS funding, you could stop enough boat crossings. Well, probably much less than that. You could stop enough boat crossings. Get our Navy into one ship to be the mastermind of the operation, and then get a bunch of smaller boats with just a few armed men on them, soldiers. That's all you need. And just go up close to the boats, the migrants, and something along the lines of ask to see their documents. And if they present no documents, or their documents do not grant them access to the UK, then just shoot the boat. You don't have to kill anyone, just shoot the boat. As long as you can then take them back to France and drop them there. Or if you just threaten to shoot the boat unless they turn around, oh, they can't turn around, all right, well, bring in the Coast Guard. Block them from going any further. Bring the Coast Guard with a bunch of handcuffs, shoot the boat, and then put them on the Coast Guard ship in handcuffs, take them back to France and drop them off there. I don't know, something like that. It wouldn't be difficult. I'm not exactly sure why the politicians aren't doing it, but we have indications that they actually don't want to, even though they keep promising that they do. So again, it's not about, you don't have to bomb anyone. Just get people in positions of power that care enough to do something about it. And they can figure out pretty quickly a solution. That's all we need. But I want to bomb them, you liberal. This is Busak. Look, if my plan doesn't work, if the deterrence doesn't work, and if they keep sending boats, we'll start bombing near the boats to scare them. We'll start shooting out the boats first and asking questions later. We'll start, I don't know, use like crowd control weapons on the water. We'll start ramming them. You know, we'll do all this stuff. But if none of that works, ultimately, yeah, we could go that far. I am sure that you wouldn't need to. Just bomb them a little bit. Yeah. Reasonable escalation. I'm sure you would not need to go that far. But in principle, I think you should do that before letting them in. Next article. Victory for Brexit as global Britain moves closer to £12 trillion trade bloc. Now, don't take the title quite at its surface level. Let's see what they actually say. See what we've actually signed up to here. Boost as new Pacific Trade Act receives royal assent, paving the way for the UK to officially join CPTPP later this year. If it's anything like those agreements that they were trying to pass 10 years ago, which were actually kind of terrible, then that's not necessarily good. However, if it exists already, and there's money being traded there, we might as well be part of it, I guess. Well, it says sink the boats, pick them up, drop them back off at France. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what you need to do. Britain's taken a major step in joining a £12 trillion international trade bloc in what would be the biggest Brexit prize yet. Business Secretary Kelly Badenoch, which is her, she does not look it, does she? But she's actually pretty based. She's arguably one of the most based people in the Conservative Party right now. Despite being a young black woman, with all the visual indications of being like a woke avatar, no, she's actually based. You wouldn't believe it, but she is. Apparently, Kemi's a mini of Michael Gove. Well, I hope not, Jack, because Gove is awful. She doesn't seem to believe what he does, anyway. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch said the new Trade Act has now become law, paving the way for the UK to formally join the vast Indo-Pacific Trade Group later this year. Indo-Pacific, so that means India, possibly China as well. She said joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership would open up a new era for British business. This is basically what the Top Gear lads did when they went to India, but with larger price tags. It will open major new markets for UK goods, from cars to textiles to whiskey, cheese, beef and lamb, and could mean lower prices for everything from coffee and kiwi fruit to clothing and electronics. Unlike the EU, there is no requirement to surrender British sovereignty or be governed by judges sitting in a foreign land. Leave the ECHR. Then we can be proud of things like that. Well, more proud. Economists have described membership of the 11-country bloc as a massive global event. Like, trading with other countries is something that we should be doing. Even if those countries are not particularly nice places, we can make them nicer with good trade. India is a former colony, so fine. Not much to say on this, but hopefully there's nothing dodgy in the bill. If we're setting up free trade with other areas, that seems okay. Do on to the next thing. Pro-Boris Tory MP slams colleagues before quitting WhatsApp chat, but MPs beg for unity. The Conservative Party is a little fractured right now. The Express can reveal another MP's fury with Mr. Sunak, but his colleagues at the 1922 committee rallied behind the Prime Minister. The 1922 committee is the organisation within the Conservative Party which receives requests and produces the official declaration of a no confidence vote. So this is the organisation in the Conservative Party that can replace their leader. I believe it's how Boris was replaced. A Conservative MP laid into his pro-Rishi Sunak colleagues in their official WhatsApp chat before sensationally quitting the group the Express understands. The fact that our government is using WhatsApp to communicate is not encouraging. It's not encouraging at all. So James Duddridge, a strident Boris Johnson loyalist, sent a message condemning Tory MPs who now call for unity after bringing down their 2019 election winner. Now, that was really stupid that they did that, but if they're rallying behind Rishi Sunak, who is not a strong and popular leader, if they kicked him out and got someone else in, like, same thing they did the last 3 times, I think they'd have a better shot, because at least he's an unknown. Like, an unknown, maybe good, maybe bad, rather than Rishi, who is a known bad. No one really likes Rishi. So they'd have a better shot if they just kicked him out and rolled the dice. Let's just see who else we can come up with. It might end up being Hunt or someone else awful. Another neo-lib establishmentarian rather. But maybe that would give them a better shot. At least it's something different. The unity thing, like, I'm not going to interrupt my enemy while they're making a mistake, because right now the Conservative Party has been, to some extent, my enemy for a long time. It's just that they were paying lip service to playing ball, doing what people demanded of them. And they did a little bit of what people demanded, to their credit, but not very much of it. So at this point, especially now that they've run through all their potentially worthwhile candidates, yeah, let's just destroy them and replace them with Reform UK. Looks like that could actually happen as well. And so if all they've got left of the Conservative Party is this core of people who are cloistering around a terrible leader, that's a pretty good formula for the Conservative Party to disappear forever. In text seen by The Express, Sir James responded to a text from former Cabinet Minister Brandon Lewis imploring MPs to act as one team. He sarcastically replied, "Absolutely, one team or we fall. Once we failed to back Boris, we were... You reap what you sow." I think he's right. Whatever you think about Boris, he did have a spirit which united people, even if it shouldn't. I'm not saying he's good or bad in that, just that people were rallying behind him. It was a massive win. Bad idea to get rid of him, I think. The Rockford and Southend East MP, who was standing down at the election, then quit the group chat. Shame he's standing down. as an MP, because if he as an MP joined Reform UK, that'd be pretty good for them. Elsewhere in Parliament, Tory MPs rallied to unify behind Rishi Sunak as he attended the 1922 committee. Speaking to his troops this evening, Mr Sunak took aim at the minority of Tory rebels who he said were harming every one of us. I'm not sure it's much of a minority, to be honest, Sunak. Tories reacted warmly to the Prime Minister's performance at the 1922 committee with frequent sustained banging of tables up to 1 minute long at points. I imagine that's tradition, but they can't really believe that he's their best chance. Seems like desperation. He is understood to have said that a small number of Tories are making him angry, adding that they aren't just harming me, they are harming every one of us in this room. Perhaps that is the right thing, Rishi. Perhaps it's time. Perhaps you are the Prime Minister who will lead to the death of your party. I kind of hope so at this point. Let's go to the next story. David Lammy, from earlier, remember? Risks fury of Labour left as he gushes over Margaret Thatcher. This was a really weird one, and I still don't know why this happened, but I'm going to try and find out. The Shadow Foreign Secretary's comments are likely to anger those on the left of his party. David Lammy, who is, in case you didn't know, one of the stupidest politicians I've ever encountered. He is essentially the male Diane Abbott of his party, and almost as bad as she is. He was the one, if you remember, who said, "We've been standing out here all day, and we haven't seen a single officer in uniform." Literally in the frame behind him is an officer in uniform. Yes, he's that guy. And he's now saying that Margaret Thatcher good. The Shadow Foreign Secretary said the former Conservative Prime Minister was a visionary leader. He told the Politico Power Play podcast, Margaret Thatcher was a visionary leader for the UK, no doubt about it, that's absolutely clear. The Labour frontbencher was defending Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves' comparison with Baroness Thatcher in a key speech yesterday. Ms Reeves prompted a backlash from those on the Labour left for saying Britain stands at an inflection point similar to that in the late 1970s. Yes, the whole world does. But Mr Lammy said Mrs Reeves' reference to Baroness Thatcher, who was Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990, was apposite. Actually, not heard that word. He said, if you look back to the end of the 1970s, Britain on its knees, sick man of Europe, we weren't even able to bury our dead and sort out our rubbish. I'm afraid we were in a mess, and it did need a big economics to get us out of that mess. He added, now you can take issue with Miss Thatcher's prescription, but she had a big manifesto for change and set about a course that lasted for over 2 decades. I think he's probably right. I think at that time you did need someone extreme, or someone strong. But strangely, Lammy, I don't think the Labour Party has ever been more like the policies of the 1970s than they are now. Perhaps only under Corbyn. But under Starmer, it's just a thin veneer of neoliberalism over that same socialism. How are you saying that Thatcher was needed and useful whilst also being a Labour MP? It's incredible. Miss Reeves' speech to the Mais lecture has been criticised by trade unions and Corbynista campaign group Momentum. Yeah, Momentum is, as it says, Corbyn's foot soldiers. The Shadow Chancellor said, when we speak of a decade of national renewal, this is what we mean. As we did at the end of the 1970s, we stand at an inflection point. And as in earlier decades, the solution lies in wide-ranging supply-side reform to drive investment, remove the blockages constraining our productive capacity, and fashion a new economic settlement, drawing on evolutions in economic thought. No, I don't think so. That sounds to me like it's time for the government to take control of large parts of the economy, because we know best. No, you don't. You can't possibly know better than the collective intelligence of millions of people making their own individual decisions. But she added that, unlike the 1980s, growth in the years to come must be broad-based, inclusive, and resilient. What you mean by that is ESG-based, I assume. Which is a terrible idea. So yeah, the whole neo-lib model has been tried. I don't think it ever really worked. Next article. Humza Yousaf humiliated as skint SNP can only afford £738 on major part of election. The SNP has spent just £738 on a handful of Facebook adverts in 2024, despite this being a general election year. Maybe they just don't value Facebook ads. but maybe skint is right. Humza Yousaf's skint SNP is... The SNP, in case you didn't know, is Scottish National Party. It's the party that always wins in Scotland because it has the name of Scotland in it. They keep voting for it, or seems like it anyway. Led by this man, who is awful, very pro-Muslim, and it's the one that Sturgeon used to run. They kept going for Scottish independence, which kept failing. The Scots want to remain part of Great Britain, not by a huge margin, but by enough. And what was it I saw recently? The sooner the SNP stops getting voted for, the better Scotland will be. Just anything else. It doesn't even have to be Scottish Conservatives. Anything other than the SNP would be an improvement, I think. Vote for the Scottish Labour or whatever you have up there that's left wing. Just don't vote for the SNP again. Compared with Labour and the Conservatives, the SNP spend on Meta's social media site has all but dried up, highlighting claims that nationalists they are not nationalists. That's very inaccurate. The Scottish National Party are only national in that they use the name Scotland as the nation of Scotland, the name as part of their party name. But in reality, far as I can tell, they're basically just UK Labour, but wanting to make Scotland worse, not specifically England. As I said, pick pretty much any other party, Scotland, any other. I don't know why they use yellow as their logo when the flag is blue and white, but I suppose just to differentiate themselves from the Conservatives. They're nationalists that want to be under the boot of the EU instead of the UK. Yeah, it's remarkable. They are not, as far as I can tell, by any means nationalist. The SNP spent just $738 on a few adverts, according to the Daily Record. Daily Record of the group who doxed Millennial Woes, which is, of course, wrong. With some focus more on former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon rather than current incumbent Mr. Yousaf. An online trends website which tracks spending on Facebook shows the SNP's Trosucks and Teeth branch spent £420 on ads, blaze it, one of which criticised media coverage of Miss Sturgeon. This compares to the two main countrywide parties forking out more than £1.5 million between them. Interesting. I hope the SNP are skint. Scottish Daily Express has previously revealed the SNP has seen large donations plummet under Mr. Yousaf's leadership amid an ongoing police probe into SNP finances. Scottish Labour's deputy leader Jackie Bailey MSP, member of Scottish Parliament, suggested the figures showed the SNP was not serious about speaking to the people of Scotland and engaging with their concerns. A bit of a stretch there, but hopefully they are losing money. Because if the Conservatives and the SNP die in the same year, I shall be a very happy wizard. She added, as the SNP's financial woes continue, it's clear that they are struggling to operate seriously as a political party. Trossachs and Teeth's Sturgeon ad said, if the appalling comments made by unionist politicians and media pundits about Nicola Sturgeon have annoyed you, a good way to respond is join the SNP. Nope, not really. She's pretty awful too. Quote, it's very easy, not expensive, and shows the naysayers what we feel. Nope, she's pretty terrible. She hasn't really been involved in politics for a while either, so I'm not sure why that's the ad they chose to pay for. Again, maybe they just decided that Facebook ads are not valuable to them, are not worth paying for. But it seems a very low figure regardless. Maybe they're, like, loading it later into the campaign. Again, still unusual. And I do hope they are in fact skinned. Next thing. Esther McVey torpedoes Penny Mordaunt leadership rumours with 3 simple words. Now, Penny Mordaunt, initially I thought she seemed quite good, but then we looked into her a bit. It turns out that she's literally co-authored, I think 1, but maybe more than 1, books with Bill Gates about exactly what you'd expect. She is a big-time WEF neocon, seemingly, and she was a potential contender for leadership alongside Rishi and Liz Truss. I think the fact that she was revealed to be of this category allied with the WEF was probably the reason she didn't get it. Probably the reason she dropped out fairly early in that running. But now that Rishi is on the ropes and Liz is gone, probably going to join Reform. I hope so. Penny is potentially up to be the next leader, and it probably wouldn't be very good. But again, it might save the party. But to be honest, I kind of would rather they cloister around a bad leader so that they collapse. Still, it might be better for them to pick Penny. But here's Esther McVey, who is, I recognize his name, I'm not sure who it is, talking about it. The Minister for Common Sense said the Commons leader previously ran for Tory leader and she didn't win. Minister for Common Sense, I actually haven't had that one before. Esther McVey rejected speculation that Penny Mordaunt could replace Rishi Sunak in Downing Street. The Minister for Common Sense highlighted how the Commons leader previously ran for the job but was unsuccessful and insisted the PM would win a confidence vote. Miss McVey told GB News it's right to say that there is a handful of disgruntled MPs, absolutely. Penny had her chance to become the leader, she didn't win, so you know that's where it is. It goes to bed, so Penny won't be the leader, it's Rishi Sunak. However, when we did those 10 Rwandan votes the other night, we were there for hours. I spoke to all the Conservative MPs and they fully support him, except for those disgruntled ones. So if there was a vote of confidence for Rishi Sunak, he'd win by a country mile. If that's the case, then let's hope the party just dies. Pressed whether a vote was needed, the Tatton MP added, why would you do that? You don't need to do that. He's the Prime Minister, and I think today, with the turning of the economy, with the global investment that he's got in, at £32 billion, and Nissan investing here, Google investing here, that's what we want to see. Some of that stuff, indeed, may be good, but the problem is he's not dealing with the big issues. That's probably true, the field. I'm guessing that Humza, indeed, is not a vote winner, so they're having trouble advertising. That may be it. Anyway, move on. Reform UK Deputy Leader issues simple message to Tories after storming ahead in new poll. Exclusive, Ben Habib, who recently stood for Reform UK in the Wellingborough by-election, believes the broken two-party system pits Parliament against the people. Not sure about that, but let's read on. Reform UK will soon overtake the Conservatives, the party's Deputy Leader Ben Habib. I really hope so. I will be so happy if that happens. Reform UK, probably not the perfect party, probably not the one that I would craft. But goddamn, are they so much better than the Conservatives? And I'm so willing to give someone else a try. Has claimed after it overtook the Liberal Democrats in a new opinion poll. The Savanta survey, published last night, puts Labour on 44%, 18 points ahead of the Tories. Significantly, Reform, led by Richard Tice, was on 11%, its highest ever Savanta total, and 2 points ahead of Ed Davies' party. Mr Habib, who recently took 13% of the vote share in with the Wellingborough by-election, which is a lot for a for a third party, that is a lot in the UK, told Express.co.uk, it is hardly surprising Reform UK is rising in the polls. The vast majority of the electorate is small C Conservative, and the Tories have forgotten what that is. That is well borne out by polls that we've reviewed on this channel. So, Tories being at 11% in a poll is not unheard of. There was a poll recently where they were at 14. But Tories being, Reform, but Reform being the third largest party and being not that far behind the Conservatives is now true of at least 2 polls that we know of. So it's becoming more true. And if you look at the aggregate of polls that I've shown many times, actually, do I have it here? Is this it? Yeah, this is it. Let's refresh this, the most recent version. But you can see here that, come on, load. You can see here that Reform UK, the light blue line here, has by far the clearest upward trajectory, and it's still going up. The Conservatives trending slightly downwards, Labour even, Lib Dems trending slightly downwards, Green even. Reform are the only party on this graph going up, and they're going up at quite a rate. Now you can see already that since about September last year, Reform have gone from about 7% to now, by some polls, 14%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, for a third party, that's huge. They are currently near the peak of the last 4 years of any third party and still going up, with the Conservatives still coming down. And they're competing directly with the Conservatives' platform. So now is the moment that this could actually happen. Now, if the Conservatives were going to do the May election, this is why. Because they're terrified of what that trajectory could lead to. If you extrapolate that trajectory out for another 6 months, they could be roughly equal with the Conservatives. And even as it is right now, they'll split the vote enough that the Conservatives will lose huge amounts of seats in the election. Even with how far behind Labour they are right now, they would lose a huge amount of seats. But with Reform splitting the vote, they could lose like 95% of their seats. Reform UK might not gain very many. It might only get 1 or 2 in total, maybe even none. but the effect of disabling the Conservatives, and if that happened, we'd suffer 5 years of Labour, and it would be suffering. But Reform UK could just replace the Conservatives then and there, because the Conservatives would have no power left, no legitimacy left, and Reform UK would suck up all of the pro-Brexit voters, which is now the majority of the Conservative Party. The Conservative voters could become irrelevant, the Conservative Party. And that, to be honest, at this point is correct. It's what should happen. So I do have a lot of hope for that. Refreshing that I've said several times now over multiple streams for those that didn't see it. Could go wrong, but it could still go very right. And I hope that a similar thing happens in Scotland, where the SNP just stop existing as well. Kemi Badenoch says diversity policies should not come at the expense of white men. Again, showing you that this woman here, who does not look like she would have these opinions, regardless, is one of the most based members of the Conservative Party currently. The Business Secretary says Britain's diversity boost has been counterproductive. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch says Britain's push for diversity has been counterproductive, saying it should not come at the expense of white men. Badenoch commissioned a report which found that the most of the money spent on equality, diversity and inclusion, which apparently our conjugation of it in the UK is EDI, no, I think DIE is more accurate, was wasted. The report, of course it was. I think, or probably all of it was. Not just wasted, but thrown at bad things. Made things worse. The report urged bosses to consider the challenges faced by the white working classes when creating diversity schemes instead of focusing solely on visible quotas, reports the Telegraph. Quotas are cancer in almost all contexts. Removed. It cited Cheshire Police after the force had to pay £100,000 after it was found that they had discriminated against a white applicant based on sexual orientation, race and gender. Similarly to the US, here you are not allowed to do that, and yet it is done routinely. The RAF also reportedly discriminated against white men in its efforts to improve diversity. Last year, it is said to have admitted that initiatives to increase the numbers of women and people from ethnic minorities resulted in unlawful positive discrimination. It's not just positive. It's any positive discrimination will result in negative discrimination by definition. RAF, for those that don't know, Royal Air Force, the equivalent of the US Air Force, obviously. Yeah, very disappointing. The same things that are happening with the US military with the diversity shit is also happening here. Still, though, I strongly suspect that, like with the US, the majority of the people that actually make up the rank and file of our military are still lean conservative. And in the US, probably much more so, which is going to help. Elsewhere, Defense Secretary Grant Shapps claimed that a woke and extremist culture has infiltrated the army. An independent panel, I assume like the managerial layers, which is always where it comes in. An independent panel had previously suggested that companies should ensure their EDI staff represent value for money. Obviously, but it's not going to happen. Writing in the Telegraph, Badenoch said the new report shows that while millions are being spent on these initiatives, many popular EDI practices such as diversity training have little to no tangible impact in increasing diversity or reducing prejudice. You shouldn't want to increase diversity. In fact, many practices have not only been proven to be ineffective, they have also been counterproductive. Badenoch concluded, but it's baby steps. It's baby steps, okay? But at least they're walking in the right direction, chat. Badenoch concluded by saying, no group should ever be worse off because of companies' diversity policies, whether that be black women or white men. Performative gestures such as compulsory pronouns and rainbow lanyards are often a sign that organizations are struggling to demonstrate how they are being inclusive. I would not word it that way. That'd be much harsher. Last year, Badenoch commissioned the Inclusion at Work panel to investigate whether EDI was working in Britain amid concerns that too much money was being spent on the schemes. I think she's probably being diplomatic with her wording here. Again, baby steps. But yeah, I would go a lot further than that. Every time that people have given the Conservative Party a chance in the last 10 years, or at least since Brexit, has been on the basis that they have made a convincing promise that they will do what the people want. And every time they got a new leader in, after the last one failed in some way, they got a new leader in, be it May, be it Boris, be it Liz. They got a new leader in who we assume, okay, this one might do it. Still our best chance. Let's give them a chance because they're a new leader and they might do better. I think Liz might actually have done it, but because of that, she was ejected by the establishment. And then they got Rishi in. Now with Rishi, we just don't have that confidence anymore. With May, we had confidence when she first got in. She failed. With Boris, we had confidence when he first got in. He failed. With Liz, we have confidence when she first got in. She failed, again, all three for different reasons, differently valid, but still, they all three failed to meet confidence. Rishi, we did not have confidence when he first got in. So the Conservative Party is now dying. It's 10 years of bated breath, of suspended abandonment, because we were confident in each successive leader. Catching up with it. This failure is the pendulum swing that would usually happen after one, or at most two, new leaders in a party. And now it's all catching up at once. If this causes the Conservative Party to die, fine. As long as those votes are swept up by the Reform UK or someone else worthy, which I think they will be. Again, I think I would be happy for the Conservative Party to die and be replaced by Reform UK, even if, in so doing, we suffer 5 years of Labour. Because at least that will set us up for some actual change, an actual chance of something happening. I don't know if Reform UK is better, but just like with all those, the various Conservative leaders, we have to try something. Reform UK is currently our best chance. 1 in 3 Tory councillors back Reform UK as best party to tackle illegal immigration. It's good news. Exclusive new poll reveals grassroots Tory politicians are unhappy with party over immigration. They really are in a state that they might lose. Their support might just collapse all from underneath them. It really is that kind of thing where you reach a critical mass and it just flips in a very short amount of time. You could see in a couple of months, those poll numbers could just be the opposite of what they are now. And from that point, it'll only continue. A lot of the supporters who would be voting for the... Put it this way. The Labour Party have not got more popular. The Conservative Party has just got less. More people have been disengaged on the right from politics because the Conservative Party is not worth voting for. From this moment onwards, Reform UK will be the only party which can claim those disaffected voters, as well as all the voters who would vote for the Conservatives who are pro-Brexit will go over to Reform. The only people the Conservatives are going to be left with, after people get over that two-party dichotomy, where the Conservatives have been the second party or the first party for so many years, if people get over that notion and realise we need something different, then all the Conservatives are going to have left are the very few, by comparison, actually neo-lib or neo-con voters, which, given polls that we've seen, is not the majority of the right in the UK. And not even the majority of people in the UK want strong pro-Brexit, anti-immigration policies, the kind of things that we would argue for. The majority of the plurality of people in the UK want that, especially the majority of Conservatives. Everything is set up for Reform UK to take that spot, so it could definitely happen. And this is just more evidence to that. Almost 1 in 3 Tory councillors back Reform UK as the best party to tackle illegal immigration, new polling suggests. And that's not like Tory voters. That's people in the party, integrated into the party already, would jump ship, potentially. The survey of 391 Conservative councillors found 77% said Rishi Sunak's party has handled the issue badly, with just 7% believing they have done well. That's even more of them. Very damning. Some 31% opted for Nigel Farage linked to Reform UK over their own party to get a grip on illegal immigration. The poll by Savanta for Labour Together, again, for Labour, this is pretty major. Maybe Labour want Reform UK. If so, I think they're underestimating their enemy, which comes ahead of May's local elections, also found 56% are unhappy with the Tories over legal migration. Very true. Just over 1 in 5 said Reform UK, which Ashfield MP Lee Anderson defected to earlier this month, would be the best party to address the issue. Again, that's of Conservative, members, people integrated into the Conservative Party, doing work for the Conservative Party. 1 in 5 says that Reform UK is the best party to deal with it. Josh Simons, director of Labour Together, says Rishi Sunak has unleashed chaos at our border and his party knows it. From his councillors up, opposition to the Prime Minister's plan grows, just like the costs. I expect a fair few Tories will be following Lee Anderson to vote or even defect to Reform this May. I really hope so. I think so too. It comes as the Prime Minister is facing a showdown with the House of Lords over his Rwanda bill, which is aimed at getting the flagship policy to send asylum seekers to the African country off the ground, literally. All right. Second to last article I have on the UK lightning round now. Reform land huge poll victory with highest ever ranking in major blow to Tories. Reform UK, which was first founded in 2018 as the Brexit Party, pitches itself as a growing threat to the Conservatives. The Tories will be concerned about Reform UK's highest ever ranking in a new poll released today, a pollster has warned. Okay. The party led by Richard Tice received its highest vote share in a Savanta poll for the first time at 11%, beating the Liberal Democrats into third place. This is the same poll that we mentioned in the article earlier, so I will move on. But to reiterate, 11% doesn't sound like much. They have had higher numbers in other polls. The important thing is that for a third party, this light blue line here is still doing very well. They are now, by almost all polls, the third party, and the Conservatives are in a real position to become the third party after Reform overtakes if they just have enough time.